Now, when you're using Photoshop and you're using the user interface, the main three elements you're going to be using will be your control panel, which is usually on the left, your options bar, and your panels. Right? So your tools bar on the left, you will usually go to this to use your regular tools, right? Like maybe to move something, or maybe to highlight something, or to crop, or to erase. So these are some basic tools. Now whenever you select a tool on your tools menu, for example, I've selected the eraser tool, then notice that the eraser tool will show up here on your options bar, and it will display options to the right of it, which is here. So you select a tool, it comes up on the option bar, and then it shows you the options that is linked to that tool, right? So if I choose to erase, maybe I want to adjust maybe the size of the eraser. So this would be the size. Maybe I want to adjust the transparency or opacity, and so forth. So this gives me all the options that is associated with the tool that I selected. Now, how you will use panels. Remember, panels are more specific tools. So if I need to, for example, change things that has to do with color, I may choose to open my color panel. Now if my color panel is not open, I gotta go to window, and then I choose color. Now because there are so many panels, it is advised that you close all the panels and only pick the ones that you plan to use. So for example, in this case, I don't think I'll be using my swatches panel, but I may use my color panel. Now it doesn't matter if you don't know if you need to use your panels yet, but to get some screen real estate, I usually suggest turn off the panels that you're not using. So I'm going to turn off the swatches panel because I don't think I'm going to use that. Now if I look back at the objective on hand, I will see that what I really want to do is find a nicer sky for this. So to perform this sky replacement using the Lasso Tool, let's go and look for the Lasso Tool. Now the Lasso Tool is simply a tool that you use to cut elements out of Photoshop, and the Lasso Tool is located right here. So that's the Lasso Tool. Now when I click the Lasso Tool, notice again what happens. I have selected this tool here, it went up on my options bar, and it is telling me that all these options I see here is linked to the Lasso Tool. Okay, now one other important thing to notice, most if not all of these icons has this little triangular arrow right beside the icons, which is right there. Very tiny, but if you look closely you will see it. Now this simply means that I can click and hold, and I will see other tools that are available to me. So essentially when I click and hold one of these icons, it expands into other subtools. So what this is saying here is that the Lasso Tool if I click and hold, is saying that I have 3 ways of using the lasso tool. So let's look at what the lasso tool does. So your lasso tool will probably be on a polygonal lasso tool. That's fine. I'm going to change it to the lasso tool at the top. And essentially what the lasso tool does is it allows you to select items. Now every time you select an item in Photoshop using the lasso tool, you get what they call the marching ants. Now the marching ants basically gives us an indication as to what is selected. Okay, so let us start cutting out the sky. So we're not going to use this tool here, because you notice we are going to use a different tool. We're going to use the polygonal lasso tool. Now before we get cutting, we're going to need another panel. So remember where our panels are located. It is located under window, and if we remember what panels are, they are essentially more detailed tools with more options. So rather than you just getting a button for your tool with options up here, the panel gives you all of these options, so they're usually a bit more flexible. So what we're going to do is open the layers panel. Looks something like this, and the layers panel allows us to edit layers, and we're going to discuss that later. So right now this is saying that I have a single layer in Photoshop, right? And this layer, which is here, is the background layer. Notice it has background there. Now when you open an image in Photoshop, it automatically comes up as the background layer, and you will see this lock here, and essentially some of the features of that background layer are currently locked. So the first thing I want to do is to convert it from a background layer into a regular layer. So to do that, I'm going to right click and say create layer from background. It's going to ask me what do I want to name the layer. I'm going to call it original image. So notice once I've turned it into a regular layer, it's no longer italized, and notice that the lock symbol is now gone. Now whenever you open an image in Photoshop, by default it will come as a background layer, which is really locked, and you need to convert it to a regular layer. So now that it's converted to a regular layer, I don't need my layers panel anymore yet. So I'm going to go to the lasso tool, and then I'm going to start cutting. Now if I use the regular lasso tool and I start to guess by clicking and guessing where the edge of this is, you realize that this is going to be a little bit untidy. So for example, I can delete this now. Now when I've deleted it, notice that it actually deletes what was cut, but it's not so neat. As you can see, this isn't cut neatly on top of the trees, and neither is the roof. Now notice when I deleted the background, I get this checkered pattern, and this checkered pattern is simply telling us that nothing exists behind here, no color, it's just going to be see-through. So I'm going to undo that. So how do you undo in Photoshop? Well, Photoshop doesn't really have undos. What it has is something called history states. Now history simply means what you have done in the past. So to access the history panel, you're going to have to go up to window and then you go down to history, and that's our history panel. So what does the history panel do? It basically keeps a record of all the things that we did in Photoshop. So for example, first thing we did was open the file, next thing we did was use the lasso tool, and so forth and so forth. Now we're going to undo, so we're going to go back to before we selected the sky, and we're going to do it a bit neater. So what I'm going to do is right click and choose deselect so that it doesn't select that rough selection we did. So I'm going to minimize my history tab because I don't really need it, so I'm just going to put it to the right. Now to start cutting, what you're going to do is use a more appropriate lasso tool, which is the polygonal lasso tool. You're going to zoom in, and to zoom in Photoshop is Control and plus. And then we're going to pan. To pan, what you do is hold spacebar, and once you hold spacebar, notice that the icon changes to a little hand. So you hold spacebar and left click, hold and drag. Click the left mouse button, hold it and drag it while you're holding the spacebar. Alright, now if you don't want to do all of those shortcuts, you can always click on the pan button, which is a subset of this tool here. So I need to click hold and drag and change it to pan tool, and I'm now able to pan around. So what I want to actually do is to use the polygonal lasso tool, and I'm going to trace, and you can try and use your best judgment. I want to zoom in, so I'm going to hold Control and click plus, and now I can give these areas a nice cut along the edge. Control and plus to do that. Pan, Control plus. So now I'm cutting out the roof. Okay, so this works as an example, so I'm gonna just close up this cut, and then again I'm going to try and delete this area here. Now also I want to go back to window and turn on my layers tab and ensure that this is not a background layer. Remember that. So we're going to go right click and choose layer from background. I want to call this layer background, BG for short. And now I'm actually able to cut, and I can hit the delete button, and you can see now I can get a much cleaner cut. So I'm actually choosing to cut this in different sections, but you might choose to trace the entire thing. And when I have traced it, I can go up and go around. I can hit delete. So if you notice, what I'm trying to do is to cut out little elements around the building. Now you can choose to do one big cut, or you can choose to do it in little pieces. So I recommend doing it in little pieces. So at the end of the day, you'll end up with the building with no sky. Now to add the sky, what you're going to do, so once you finish cutting these out by cutting it in little sections and press delete, you're going to end up with the house, maybe with a cutout, and then you have some leftovers. Now to get rid of the leftovers, I would just really need to make one cut here and then delete that by hitting the delete button. So at the end of the day, I want to end up with just a house and no sky. So I can start cutting again. The pan. Now this type of work is pretty much what most persons end up doing in Photoshop, cutting stuff out. So it's not as accurate as I would want it to be, but it works. So I'm going to come back around here and I'm going to hit the delete. So now I've deleted all of the sky. Now what I want to do is I want to go to file, and then I want to go to, in this case I'm going to go to place embedded. You may not have that depending on your version of Photoshop, but you're really looking for the button place. Now you can place the sky in, or you can just drag it in. Let's try the dragging method because it's easier. You find the sky that you want, and this is actually in the class site folder. You drag it and release. Now once you drop it in, notice that it's actually on top. Now it is on top because of the order in the layers that you have here. So the cloud I've just put in is on top because it is the topmost layer, and the background that we had before is on the bottom. So what we want to do is actually flip that around. So to do that, all we need to do is to drag this layer here, click, hold and drag it upward. So now the house is in front of that layer. I want to click on the sky, click on the move tool. Now when I click on the move tool, remember the same thing happens as before. I select this tool, it comes up here, and then it displays options to the right of it, and these options are all available with using this tool. So to wrap up, what we need to do is select the move tool, then we're going to select this option which comes up in the options panel. For the move tool, we're going to choose auto select, and that will give us the ability to control the sizes. So we're going to hold shift and make this a little bigger, make that a little bigger, and you have a sky replacement there. So in a nutshell, that is the exercise 1A.